So miniature wargaming isn't the easiest hobby to get into because of the barriers the hobby naturally has. You gotta buy the paint, the miniature, the brushes, and you gotta find the space to do it. But right now is probably a good time to get into it.
VMK
Hey yo everyone, my name is Jessica, and a few months ago I got into miniature painting despite the aforementioned barriers, and in this video I want to talk about the reasons that got me to stop miniature painting and why I'm back. So for starters, I want to talk about the reasons why I stopped miniature painting. So back in 2019, I had initially gotten into miniature painting back when I just started working, and honestly it was such a big mistake. So reason number one is it's just so expensive. I remember it was actually just cheaper for me to join what we called a pasabay group or a group buying, where myself and a bunch of other people would order off someone's cousin in the UK and we would just split the shipping between ourselves. But the only problem was the long wait. It could take 2 weeks to a month, and honestly it kind of killed the vibe for me there. Reason number two is the nightmare of actually acquiring the paint once you had the models, and that was because popular paint brands at the time like Vallejo and Games Workshop were having such major supply issues that even the basic colors were really hard to come by. Now, miniature painting uses a sort of a special pigment. You can't really be using regular acrylics since these paints use a much finer ground. I remember the colors I needed were always out of stock, and I had to physically travel to 3 local game stores, all in different places, just to assemble the colors I needed to paint my miniatures, which was honestly such a huge deal breaker for me, especially as someone with a 9 to 5. And reason number 3 was the lack of space to actually do the hobby. At the time, I had lived with my parents, and there really wasn't enough space for me to store my minis and my paints with how cramped our apartment was. And it really sucked because I actually did start to enjoy the painting process. And all of those 3 reasons combined was such a big deal breaker for me to get into the hobby that I actually had to sell off the miniatures I picked up. And the paints eventually rotted away. I actually still have some of the original paints I owned back in 2019. And fast forward to 2024, I got back into it, and here's why I think it's a good time to start for you as well. First reason is that there is no shortage of hobby supplies. There seems to have been a big boom in miniature wargaming's popularity recently, and based on what I'm seeing, it's not just Warhammer and Games Workshop now being played at the local game stores. There are so many different games like Conquest, Warcrow, A Song of Ice and Fire that are just popping up in my local game stores, and it's really nice to see all these different games getting some love. Competition and variety is very healthy for our hobby, and it also means that there is no shortage of options as someone who is an inspiring wargamer. And the best part is you don't really have to have the minis for the game you want to be playing. There's always the option of having them 3D printed from the many artists who sculpt for the different games I just mentioned. Aside from the miniatures, there are also a lot of paint brands that just popped up, giving us a lot of options in terms of paint. We have a pretty decent variety of paint brands such as Hyro, Arcus, Armored Komodo, and of course Citadel. And I find that it's rather easy for me to get the paints I need for a project. So overall, supply-wise, it's a really good time to jump in. Moving on to my reason number 2, which will probably be more appealing to our creative bunch, it's that miniature painting is just a really good way to express your creativity, especially if you're like me, who took up a creative degree but left the field because of how terrible artists are just treated. But you really miss the creative side of things. Honestly, after my work, I really look forward to sitting down with a nice cup of coffee and then painting away at the miniature I'm working on for the week. It really is just therapeutic painting the miniature. And moving on to reason number 3, techniques and tutorials are really easy to come by nowadays. They are so readily available. There's never been an easier time to learn about the hobby, and it's not just about the miniature painting. As a beginner myself, I usually need guidance on figuring out how to build, paint, and play with the miniatures I just purchased, or even for stuff like a paint effect I want to achieve. And honestly, there's a lot of channels that cover these, and a few that I personally watch are Tabletop Minions, Miniac, Rogues Hobbies, and Midwinter Minis. And I honestly want to say thank you to them because my hobby journey has been a lot smoother because of their guides, and it's a great comfort for me when I listen to the videos as I paint. So I highly recommend checking them out. This last one is a little bit of an extra reason, and I'm not quite sure if it's going to connect with anyone because this one's a little bit more personal. And it's how I developed my interest, not just in miniature painting, but in art as a whole. And I want to share it with you guys. So miniature painting has been a great way for me to connect with my dad. Ever since I was little, I used to paint with him out in the garden. I would be painting on a small illustration board, and he would be painting on his larger illustration board or canvas. And that kind of stopped because of work, family, and life just got in the way. Now that he's retired and he started painting again, it ended up inspiring me and I started painting too. He puts acrylic on canvas, I put acrylic on my little plastic men. And it's a really good feeling, despite us living in different parts of the country. And I don't really get to see him very often. Him showing me his work and me showing him my little miniatures is how we connect. And it means a lot to me. And Dad, if you're watching this, thanks for teaching me how to paint. Now those were my reasons on why you should try miniature painting. And as for the few I may have convinced, you may be wondering, how do I get started? Now that's a whole video in itself that I have yet to make, but do check out the channels I recommended earlier. And if you have any recommended channels that you want to put out there, feel free to comment down below, as I'm also looking for some myself. But that's it for this video. I hope I managed to convince you to at least try miniature painting, and let me know if I did. But if you're already a miniature painter, let me know what got you into miniature painting, and help me convince a few more people to join our wonderful hobby. Once again, my name is Just Siga, and I talk about my experiences in miniature painting every day.